Imagine an empire so vast it seemed eternal, until a 15-year-old boy seized its throne. He wasn't just a ruler, he claimed to be a living god. What followed was 4 years of shocking decadence, forbidden rituals, and chaos that nearly tore the world apart. This is the forgotten story of Kaelus, the boy who tried to remake an empire in his own image, and paid the ultimate price. Section 1. The Procession of Ashes. The wind carries the smell of incense and ash through the grand forum of Virilia, the heart of the vast Arathian Empire. You stand among thousands, pressed shoulder to shoulder, your breath catching in your throat as the procession passes by. The sun gleams off marble columns and bronze statues, yet there's a strange darkness beneath the celebration, like rot beneath polished wood. The streets are lined with banners of crimson and gold, fluttering above the heads of silent soldiers. Their armor gleams, but their expressions are stone, grim and unyielding. At their center rolls a massive chariot drawn by 6 black stallions, its wheels carved with symbols you do not recognize. Upon the chariot stands a boy. He cannot be more than 15, his face painted in patterns of shimmering blue and white, his hair cascading down his shoulders like a river of midnight. His robe is unlike anything Virilia has ever seen. Woven with gold thread, shimmering like liquid flame. He does not raise a sword or make a gesture of power. Instead, he raises his arms as though welcoming the crowd into some sacred ceremony. The crowd does not cheer. They watch in silence, as if under a spell, their minds fogged by a mixture of awe and terror. Only the rhythmic pounding of drums, foreign and wild, fills the air. Beside the boy rests a massive stone, smooth and black, mounted on a golden pedestal. It is said to have fallen from the heavens centuries ago, a relic worshipped by an ancient mountain cult far beyond the eastern provinces. Priests dressed in scarlet veils surround it, swaying as they chant in a language the common people do not understand. A whisper ripples through the crowd. "This is the new emperor? This boy?" A man near you mutters, clutching his wife's hand. "Hush!" she hisses. "Do you want the Red Guard to hear you?" For even now, the Emperor's personal guard. Draped in foreign silks instead of traditional military garb, stalk the edges of the procession like predators, their curved blades glinting. As the chariot draws near, the boy's strange, luminous eyes sweep over the crowd. For a moment, they lock with yours. A chill rushes through you. His gaze feels like being touched by something not entirely human, both divine and profane. This is Arathian, the newly crowned emperor of the Arathian Empire. And though he has ruled for mere weeks, already there are whispers that he seeks not just to rule Virilia, but to remake it entirely, in his own image. Section 2. A Child of Ashes and Fire. Years before the chariot and the silent crowds, before his name was spoken with trembling reverence or hatred, Arathian was just a boy named Kaelus. He was born far from the marble palaces of Virilia, in the remote city of Ishkur, a place of desert winds and jagged mountains. Ishkur was a land of traders, mystics, and zealots, where old gods still demanded blood offerings and where the line between holy visions and madness was dangerously thin. Kaelus's mother, Saranya, was a woman of ruthless ambition. Though born into a minor noble house, she possessed a mind as sharp as any general's blade and a hunger for power that burned hotter than the desert sun. She claimed lineage from one of the ancient queens of Ishkur, a claim that may or may not have been true. In Ishkur, bloodlines were less important than whether others believed they were true. Kaelus's father, Vero, was a shadowy figure, a high priest of the flame oracle cult that dominated Ishkur's spiritual life. He spent most of Kaelus's childhood performing strange rituals in the great obsidian temple that loomed over the city. When Kaelus was 5, Vero vanished into the mountains and never returned. Some said he was consumed by the gods he served. Others whispered he had been murdered by Saranya, who no longer needed him. From the very beginning, Kaelus's upbringing was steeped in mystery. He was educated not only in the sword and the scroll, but in forbidden rites. He was taught to dance beneath the falling stars while chanting the names of ancient deities, to wear the robes of both priest and priestess, to see the world as a place where boundaries were illusions. At night, Saranya would whisper to him as he lay beneath silk sheets, her voice like a serpent coiled around his mind. "Remember, my son," she would say, stroking his hair. "The world is clay. Men think it is stone, unchanging, but they are fools. You will be the hand that reshapes it. You will be both king and god." Even as a child, Kaelus absorbed her words like dry sand drinking water. But beyond his mother's teachings, there was something unusual about Kaelus himself. Strange things happened around him. Flames would flicker in his presence, even when there was no wind. Animals behaved oddly, following him or fleeing in terror. When he spoke, even hardened soldiers sometimes fell silent, listening as though to a prophet. The priests of the Flame Oracle began whispering that the boy was more than mortal, that he was the vessel of Ashvaris, the ancient deity of chaos and rebirth, whose sacred black stone was kept hidden deep within the temple vaults. By the time Kaelus reached 13, he was already the central figure in a growing religious movement. His public appearances drew enormous crowds. His performances, half ritual, half spectacle, were unlike anything the conservative citizens of Virelia could understand. But Saranya's ambitions extended beyond the desert. She looked westward, toward the beating heart of the empire, where the old Emperor Valerian sat upon the golden throne, ruling a domain that stretched from the tundra of the north to the sun-scorched deserts of Ishkar. Valerian was aging, his reign plagued by corruption and unrest. His generals squabbled like jackals. The Senate bickered while provinces rebelled. Saranya saw her chance. "Kaelus," she told her son one night as they stood on the temple balcony, the black stone glimmering behind them. "The empire is rotting. When wood rots, it takes only a single spark to burn it down. You will be that spark." Kaelus turned his luminous eyes toward her. "And when it burns, mother?" he asked softly. "What then?" "Then," Saranya said, her lips curving into a smile, "we will build something new from the ashes." Section 3, The Soldier's Oath. The spark was lit in the spring of the year of the serpent. At that time, the emperor's most trusted general, Marcanus, ruled the eastern legions stationed in Ishkar. Known as the Iron Wolf, Marcanus was feared and respected in equal measure. But he was deeply unpopular among the common soldiers, for he had cut their pay and enforced strict discipline. Saranya struck precisely when resentment was at its peak. One sultry evening, she summoned the legion's commanders to the great square outside the Flame Oracle Temple. The soldiers gathered reluctantly, their armor clinking in the torchlight. And there, before tens of thousands of men, Kaelus appeared. He was dressed in flowing crimson robes, his face painted in the sacred patterns of the Oracle cult. Music swelled, flutes, drums, the eerie wail of stringed instruments. "Brothers!" Saranya cried, stepping forward beside her son. Her voice rang out like a blade striking stone. "You have suffered under the yoke of tyrants. Your emperor grows fat while your families starve. But tonight the gods themselves send you a savior." She gestured to Kaelus. The boy raised his arms, and the crowd fell silent. His eyes gleamed unnaturally in the torchlight. "I am Kaelus, son of fire, child of the stars," he declared in a voice that seemed to echo from the very stones beneath their feet. "The blood of emperors flows in my veins. And I tell you this, the gods have decreed a new dawn. Follow me, and I will lead you to glory beyond imagining." The soldiers shifted uneasily. Some muttered in disbelief. Others crossed themselves with the sign of Virelia's ancient gods. Then Kaelus did something extraordinary. He stepped barefoot into a brazier of burning coals. Gasps erupted from the crowd, but he did not flinch. Instead, he began to dance, whirling and spinning, flames licking his skin without leaving so much as a blister. "Behold the blessing of Ashvaris!" Saranya shouted. "The living god walks among you!" In that moment, doubt melted away. Soldiers who had moments earlier grumbled about pay now fell to their knees, shouting Kaelus's name. "Hail Kaelus! Hail the living flame!" Marcanus tried to rally his officers, but it was too late. His own bodyguards turned on him, cutting him down where he stood. His severed head was presented to Kaelus as an offering, By dawn, the eastern legions had sworn loyalty to Kaelus, proclaiming him Imperator Kaelus Vares, chosen of the gods. The rebellion had begun. Section 4. March of the Crimson Tide. The rebellion did not creep westward, it surged like a tidal wave. Kaelus's army, now known as the Crimson Tide, swept across the desert, gathering followers from every province they passed through. At first, they were a ragged coalition of zealots and deserters, but Saranya's gold and Kaelus's unearthly charisma bound them together. Wherever they marched, they carried the sacred black stone of Ashvares, mounted on a gilded cart drawn by white oxen. Priests surrounded it day and night, chanting in tongues no Roman scholar could translate. As the Crimson Tide approached the fertile river valleys, cities began to surrender without a fight. Governors who had once served Emperor Valerian abandoned him, declaring loyalty to Kaelus. Some were motivated by genuine belief, others simply wanted to survive. Kaelus himself rode in a chariot of bronze, his robes growing ever more elaborate. Some days he appeared dressed as a warrior king, his chest bare and painted with swirling symbols. Other days he wore flowing silks, his hair braided with jewels, his appearance deliberately androgynous. To his followers, this shifting identity was proof of his divine nature. To his enemies, it was a sign of dangerous madness. Among the generals who opposed him was Cassian Varro, a grizzled veteran who had defended the western borders for decades. Cassian understood the threat Kaelus posed better than anyone. "He is not merely a rebel," Cassian told the Imperial Council in Berelia. "He is a prophet, a living symbol. You cannot fight a symbol with swords alone. We must destroy his myth before it consumes the Empire." But Emperor Valerian, weary and paranoid, dismissed Cassian's warnings. "You are frightened of a boy," the Emperor scoffed. "I have ruled for 30 years. I have crushed barbarians and traitors alike. This desert child will be no different." His words proved fatal. When Cassian rode out with his legions to confront Kaelus near the city of Carthage, he found not an army, but a religious movement. Kaelus's forces marched under crimson banners bearing the symbol of a coiled serpent. Their chants rolled across the battlefield like thunder. Before the battle could even begin, Cassian's soldiers began deserting. Some claimed to see visions of Ashvares rising from the black stone, calling them to join the new order. Others were simply seduced by Kaelus's promises of gold and glory. By nightfall, Cassian's army had crumbled. He was captured and brought before Kaelus himself. The boy emperor-in-waiting greeted him with a serene smile. "General Cassian," Kaelus said, his voice calm and almost tender. "You fought bravely, for the wrong world. Kneel, and I will give you a place in the new dawn." Cassian spat at his feet. "You are a heretic and a madman," he growled. "The Empire will not survive you." Kaelus's smile never faltered. "The Empire as it is should not survive," he replied softly. "Its time is over. Mine has begun." Cassian was executed the next morning, his head displayed on a pike as the Crimson Tide continued its unstoppable march. Section 5. The Crumbling Throne. By the time Kaelus's forces reached the outer provinces of Varelia, panic had seized the imperial court. The once mighty Senate was paralyzed. Senators debated endlessly while mobs rioted in the streets. The Red Guard, Kaelus's feared personal enforcers, had infiltrated the city, spreading terror and confusion. Emperor Valerian locked himself inside the Golden Palace, emerging only to scream orders at his advisors. His most trusted minister, High Chancellor Draven, tried desperately to maintain order. "Majesty," Draven pleaded, bowing low before the throne. "We must recall the Western legions. They are loyal still. If we unite them with the city guard, we can hold the capital until reinforcements arrive." Valerian's face was gaunt, his hands trembling as he clutched the arms of his throne. "Unite them?" he hissed. "Do you not see? They will betray me too. They whisper in their camps, just as these snakes whisper in my halls. Even you, Draven. I see the way you look at me." Draven's jaw tightened, but he bowed again. "I live only to serve, Majesty." But privately, even Draven had begun to doubt the Emperor's sanity. Meanwhile, Kaelus's mother, Serania, sent emissaries to the capital, promising peace if Valerian abdicated. The emperor refused, but his own senators began to secretly negotiate with her. The final blow came when Kaelus himself sent a message to the people of Varelia, delivered by his priests. I am the flame that consumes the old and lights the new. I am the child of gods, born to free you from chains of stone and blood. Open your gates to me, and I will lead you into a dawn where all are remade. The message spread like wildfire. Within days, riots erupted. The city guard deserted. And one cold morning, the Senate convened without the emperor's consent and declared Kaelus the rightful ruler of the Arathian Empire. Valerian fled the palace in disguise but was captured before he reached the harbor. His fate was sealed when Kaelus's army entered Varelia in triumph. The old emperor was brought before Kaelus, who now sat upon the golden throne draped in crimson and gold. Do you understand now? Kaelus asked gently. The world does not belong to you, or to men like you. It belongs to me. Valerian tried to speak, but his words were drowned out by the chants of the crimson tide echoing through the halls. Hail Kaelus! Hail the living flame! That night, Valerian's body was burned upon a pyre while Kaelus proclaimed the birth of a new age. Would you like me to continue into Section 6, where Kaelus begins remaking the empire and shocking the world with his radical reforms? Section 6, The New Dawn. The dawn after Valerian's pyre was unlike any the empire had ever seen. Kaelus did not step timidly into his new role. He seized it, wrapping the imperial mantle around himself as though he had worn it his entire life. The golden throne, once the seat of centuries of rigid tradition, now became the stage for a radical experiment. The very morning after his coronation, Kaelus shocked the Senate with his first decree. The senators gathered in the hall of marble pillars, whispering nervously as Kaelus entered, not in the crimson military cloak of an emperor, but in a shimmering white robe embroidered with suns and serpents. His hair was braided with gold threads, his face painted in the intricate markings of the flame oracle cult. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some senators made the sign of the old gods, warding off evil. Kaelus raised a hand, and the hall fell silent. His voice was soft but carried to every corner of the room. Today, we shed the skin of the past, he declared. The old laws, built on blood and falsehood, are dead. From this day forward, there shall be no distinction between conqueror and conquered, man and woman, master and slave. The world will be remade in the image of truth. A ripple of confusion spread through the chamber. Senator Cadron, a conservative traditionalist, rose to his feet, trembling with fury. Majesty, this is madness. The empire has endured for 1,000 years by maintaining order. If you tear down its foundations, you will doom us all. Kaelus's gaze turned to him, serene, almost pitying. Order, he said softly, is merely the lie the powerful tell to keep their thrones. He gestured, and 2 red guards stepped forward. Take him, Kaelus said. Cadron's protest turned to screams as he was dragged from the hall. His fate would serve as the first warning. From that day, Kaelus's decrees came in a relentless flood. Slavery was abolished, though many suspected the former slaves now owed their lives to the emperor's cult rather than true freedom. Temples of the old gods were converted to sanctuaries of Ashvaris, the flame deity Kaelus claimed to embody. The Senate was stripped of its power, reduced to a ceremonial role. New laws were issued recognizing gender fluidity, allowing citizens to choose their identities and roles regardless of tradition. At first, many citizens were bewildered but cautiously optimistic. Freed slaves celebrated in the streets. Marginalized cults came out of hiding, joining in wild festivals sanctioned by the new emperor. The streets of Varelia filled with music, dance, and incense as Kaelus's rituals spread. But beneath the surface, resentment simmered. The noble houses, long accustomed to privilege, saw their power slipping away. The military elite grumbled at being commanded by priests instead of generals. Even the common citizens, who at first rejoiced at the lifting of certain restrictions, began to feel unease at the emperor's increasingly eccentric behavior. Section 7. The Temple of Flame. One of Kaelus's most audacious acts was the construction of a colossal new temple atop the Palatine Rise, the spiritual and political heart of Virelia. The temple was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. Its outer walls were plated in bronze that reflected the sun's rays like fire. Towering statues of serpents coiled around spires that reached skyward. At its center was a vast circular chamber, open to the heavens, where the sacred black stone of Ashvaris rested upon a dais of molten gold. Kaelus himself presided over the temple's dedication ceremony. Tens of thousands gathered to witness it: senators, soldiers, commoners, and foreign dignitaries. He appeared not as an emperor, but as a living deity. His robes were woven with phoenix feathers, his face adorned with jewels. Around him danced his chosen attendants, men and women of striking beauty, their bodies painted in brilliant reds and golds. When the ceremony began, the crowd fell into a strange, hypnotic silence. Kaelus raised his arms. "Behold the flame that burns away lies!" he cried. "From this day forth, there is no Virelia and no Ishkur. There is only the realm of the living flame. All boundaries are ash beneath my feet." The attendants began a frenzied dance, accompanied by drums and flutes. Incense filled the air, thick and cloying. Some spectators swayed as if intoxicated. Then, to the shock of all, Kaelus lifted a ceremonial dagger and cut his palm, letting his blood drip onto the black stone. The stone glowed faintly, as if responding to his offering. The crowd erupted in gasps. Some fell to their knees, crying out in worship. Others fled, terrified. In the Senate chambers the next day, whispers spread. "This is no longer rule," Senator Phaedra murmured to her peers. "This is blasphemy." But none dared speak against Kaelus openly. Section 8. Fractures in the Guard. The Red Guard, once Kaelus's fiercest supporters, began to falter under the strain of his increasingly erratic decrees. Captain Darius, commander of the Guard, had served under Valerian before swearing loyalty to Kaelus. At first, he believed the boy's rise was divinely ordained. But as time passed, his faith wavered. Late one night, Darius met secretly with two of his most trusted lieutenants in a candlelit barracks chamber. "This cannot continue," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "The Emperor's festivals grow more depraved by the day. Men and women bathing together in the streets, sacred vows broken, soldiers forced to kneel before priests instead of generals. Our men are losing discipline." Lieutenant Garin frowned. "But if we defy him, the Crimson Zealots will slaughter us. Half the city worships him as a god." Darius slammed his fist on the table. "Half the city fears him. They are silent only because his cult drowns them in noise and fire. We are soldiers, not acolytes. We must remember our oath, to protect the Empire, not a mad child." A heavy silence fell over the room. "Are you speaking of rebellion, Captain?" Garin asked softly. Darius's jaw tightened. "I am speaking of survival," he said. "And perhaps salvation." What they did not know was that Sarania, Kaelus's mother, had spies everywhere. The seeds of treachery were already being sown, but she was determined to keep her son's grip on power unbroken. For now. Section 9. Scandal in the Palace. As Kaelus's grip on power tightened, his private life became as infamous as his public decrees. The Emperor surrounded himself with a coterie of lovers, attendants, and favored courtiers chosen as much for their beauty as for their loyalty. Among them was Lyron, a celebrated charioteer whose athletic prowess and striking features made him a symbol of masculine strength throughout the Empire. When Kaelus publicly declared Lyron to be his consort of the sun, the court erupted in shock. At a lavish banquet in the Golden Palace, Kaelus entered the hall hand in hand with Lyron, both wearing matching golden crowns. "This union," Kaelus proclaimed, his voice echoing beneath the vaulted ceiling, "is a sacred joining blessed by the flame. As Ashvaris binds the heavens and earth, so too are we bound." The guests murmured uneasily. Some averted their eyes. Others whispered angrily into their cups. Senator Phaedra rose, her face pale. "Majesty," she began carefully. Our traditions. Traditions are chains, Kaelus interrupted, his eyes blazing. And I am the fire that melts them. The hall fell silent. Phaedra sat down slowly, her hands trembling. From that night forward, rumors spread like wildfire. It was said that Kaelus and Lyran held wild midnight rituals in the palace gardens, where boundaries between gender, rank, and even species dissolved. Some claimed to have seen Kaelus dressed in flowing gowns, performing dances meant to summon divine visions. Others whispered that he sought out physicians to change his body entirely, becoming both god and goddess. To Kaelus's supporters, these acts were proof of his divine transcendence. To his enemies, they were the final sign of madness. Even Saranya began to worry. In private, she confronted her son. You must be more cautious, she urged, gripping his shoulders. The nobles whisper rebellion. Even your guard grows restless. Kaelus smiled serenely. Let them whisper, mother. Their fear feeds the flame. But beneath his calm exterior, cracks were beginning to show. Final section, the fall and the echo. As Kaelus's grip on power tightened, his private life became as infamous as his public decrees. The emperor surrounded himself with a coterie of lovers, attendants, and favored courtiers chosen as much for their beauty as for their loyalty. Among them was Lyran, a celebrated charioteer whose athletic prowess and striking features made him a symbol of masculine strength throughout the empire. When Kaelus publicly declared Lyran to be his consort of the sun, the court erupted in shock. At a lavish banquet in the Golden Palace, Kaelus entered the hall hand in hand with Lyran, both wearing matching golden crowns. This union, Kaelus proclaimed, his voice echoing beneath the vaulted ceiling, is a sacred joining blessed by the flame. As Ashvaris binds the heavens and earth, so too are we bound. The guests murmured uneasily. Some averted their eyes. Others whispered angrily into their cups. Senator Phaedra rose, her face pale. Majesty, she began carefully. Our traditions. Traditions are chains, Kaelus interrupted, his eyes blazing. And I am the fire that melts them. The hall fell silent. Phaedra sat down slowly, her hands trembling. From that night forward, rumors spread like wildfire. It was said that Kaelus and Lyran held wild midnight rituals in the palace gardens, where boundaries between gender, rank, and even species dissolved. Some claimed to have seen Kaelus dressed in flowing gowns, performing dances meant to summon divine visions. Others whispered that he sought out physicians to change his body entirely, becoming both god and goddess. To Kaelus's supporters, these acts were proof of his divine transcendence. To his enemies, they were the final sign of madness. Even Saranya began to worry. In private, she confronted her son. You must be more cautious, she urged, gripping his shoulders. The nobles whisper rebellion. Even your guard grows restless. Kaelus smiled serenely. Let them whisper, mother. Their fear feeds the flame. But beneath his calm exterior, cracks were beginning to show. The turning point came during the Festival of Renewal, a massive celebration meant to mark the third year of Kaelus's reign. The streets of Varelia overflowed with dancers, priests, and revelers. At the climax of the festival, Kaelus stood before the black stone in the Temple of Flame, ready to proclaim the final unification of the empire under Ashvaris. As the crowd chanted, he raised his arms and shouted, Behold! The gods themselves shall walk among us! But nothing happened. The sky remained silent. The black stone lay inert. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Kaelus's face twisted with desperation. He cut both his palms, letting his blood pour over the stone. Ashvaris! He screamed. Answer me! Still, there was nothing. Then, somewhere in the crowd, a voice shouted, He is no god, only a boy playing at power! The chant began slowly, then spread like fire. False flame! False flame! Kaelus froze, his eyes wide with terror. For the first time, doubt pierced his aura of invincibility. That night, he raged through the palace, accusing his closest followers of betrayal. Several priests were executed on the spot. Others fled into the streets. To many, it seemed as though the gods themselves had turned away from Kaelus. Among those who had lost faith was Captain Darius of the Red Guard. After the failed festival, Darius met secretly with Sarania's sister, Lady Neria, who had been quietly grooming a rival claimant to the throne, Kaelus's younger cousin, Aurelian, a boy of 13 with a calm demeanor and traditional upbringing. "The Empire will not survive another year under Kaelus," Neria said, her voice low. "The people are ready for a savior, someone who represents stability." Darius nodded grimly. "And the guard will stand with him. But we must strike quickly, before Kaelus recovers his strength." The plan was simple and brutal. During a routine meeting with the guard commanders, Kaelus would be surrounded and eliminated. Sarania suspected treachery, but even she underestimated the depth of the conspiracy. On the morning of the ambush, she clutched her son's hand. "Be careful, Kaelus," she whispered. "There are shadows even the flame cannot burn away." Kaelus smiled faintly, though his eyes were haunted. "If they betray me, Mother, they betray the gods themselves." The meeting took place in the Hall of Spears, a vast chamber lined with ancient weapons. Kaelus entered surrounded by a handful of loyal priests. Sarania followed close behind, her face pale. At first, all seemed normal. Darius bowed low, greeting the Emperor with rehearsed humility. "Majesty," he said, "we have gathered to discuss the safety of the capital." But as Kaelus approached the central dais, the guard closed ranks behind him. "What is this?" Sarania demanded. Darius raised his sword. "It is salvation," he said coldly. "For the Empire." The Red Guard struck without hesitation. Kaelus's priests were cut down instantly. Sarania threw herself in front of her son, taking a blade meant for him. "Mother!" Kaelus screamed, cradling her as she collapsed. "Run!" she gasped, her blood staining his robes. The flame must not die. But there was nowhere to run. Kaelus fought like a cornered lion, wielding a ceremonial spear. His voice rang out, half command, half plea. "Traitors! The gods will punish you." Darius struck the final blow, driving his sword through Kaelus's heart. "The gods are silent," he said. As Kaelus fell, the black stone in the temple across the city cracked in two, releasing a plume of smoke that blotted out the sun. The body of the boy emperor was dragged through the streets, stripped and mutilated, before being thrown into the river Vira. His mother's body was burned alongside his, a final act of erasure. By nightfall, Aurelian was proclaimed emperor. His first decrees were designed to erase Kaelus's legacy. The Temple of Flame was demolished. The cult of Ashvaris was outlawed. The old gods were restored to their temples. All decrees related to gender and freedom were repealed. The nobles celebrated, believing stability had returned. The Senate praised Aurelian as the restorer of order. But in the alleys and hidden shrines of Virilia, whispers persisted. Some claimed that Kaelus's spirit still lingered, waiting for the day when the flame would rise again. Others quietly mourned the brief, wild years when the world had seemed full of impossible possibilities. Years later, storytellers would debate whether Kaelus had been a mad tyrant or a visionary prophet. To the victors, he was a monster who nearly destroyed the empire. To the marginalized, the slaves he had freed, the outcasts he had uplifted, he was a symbol of what might have been. In a dim tavern near the river, an old man told a story to a circle of wide-eyed children. "They say on the night Kaelus died, the stars burned brighter than ever before," he whispered. "And if you listen closely when the wind blows through the ruins of the temple, you can still hear his laughter." The children shivered. "Was he evil?" one asked. The old man stared into the fire for a long moment. "No," he said at last. "He was different. Too different for this world." Standing once more in the Grand Forum, you watch as Aurelian's soldiers march past in their neat ranks. The city seems calm, the empire stable. But beneath the marble streets, beneath the chants of tradition restored, something lingers, a memory, a question. Was Kaelus's reign a nightmare best forgotten, or a glimpse of a future that will one day return. For even as the statues of the old gods are polished, and the black stone lies buried deep beneath the earth, the flame cannot be fully extinguished. And somewhere, in a hidden corner of the empire, a child is born with eyes that shimmer like fire. The story is not over. It never is.